got any experience of working there, you can get completely deluged by the casework, I always think, because a lot of it is not really anything to do with your role as a Member of Parliament. It's quasi-social work, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, I'm told that the role of a local MP has changed very dramatically. The famous story of Enoch Powell, who, however many years ago it was, 20 or 30 years ago, didn't even have an office and just sat at a desk in the House of Commons library, writing an occasional letter in elegant copperplate longhand with a fountain pen. Those are long gone. So yes, I think the job has changed. It's interesting, though. I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing that MPs get to see when the system's failing. And by and large, people only go to their MP surgery if they've tried it pretty much everything else and they are absolutely desperate.
And what are the big issues in your post bag?
I mean, it goes in cycles, as you would imagine. There's a big issue locally about drugs and rehabs. I've already mentioned that. We're a seaside town, but we happen to have it more so than many other seaside towns. And I'm running a big campaign about that. There's a problem with the local health service, which is underfunded relative to the rest of the country. There are problems with local transport infrastructure. But then there's also regular things that come up just with the natural ebb and flow of politics. So, I get letters about, I get letters about Bristol International Airport as well. But you also get the stuff about what's your party's policy on X or Y. And that will depend on what's in that week's headlines, or whether or not Tony Blair's resigned, or what Gordon Brown said, or what David Cameron said. Yeah. So that stuff comes in as well.
And how did your maiden speech go?
Seems a very long time ago. We were all encouraged to get on with it, you see, because you can't ask questions until you made your maiden speech, which I didn't know. I'm sure other people who've been researchers did. Well, no one heckled too badly. It wasn't. I'm told that was it Disraeli's maiden speech was famously awful, and he got sort of shouted down and booed out of the Commons, and he didn't do too badly.
So there will come a time when you will listen to what I've got to say.
Exactly right. Yes.
Words to that effect.
So that didn't happen to me. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. Maiden speeches are odd. People seem to get very worried about it, but I was very reassured by something I was told by an old hand who sort of took me aside and said, "Just remember," he said, "this is the one occasion in your entire Commons career, be it long or be it short, when no one will interrupt you. You won't get intervened on, providing you don't become stray off-piste and sort of say outrageous things. No one will interrupt you. So actually, you've got a clear run." And that was a sort of small crumb of comfort when you're facing that first big moment.
Now, did you decide when you were elected there are going to be sort of two or three issues that I want to concentrate on, and sort of when I've finished my glorious 30-year career in Parliament, I want to be remembered for having achieved X? Or have you just sort of gone with the flow?
Something in between those two, I think. I came into the House with a series of election pledges that I'd made to the people of Weston-super-Mare to do something about, for example, the drugs rehab. So I'm honour and duty bound to make sure that I'm pushing those campaigns forward. So they are, if you like, the backbone of what I do every day. Yeah. Trying to find opportunities to raise them, trying to find opportunities to push them forward. So that gives me a ready-made agenda anyway. And even if I wasn't honour bound, I think I want to do it from a purely self-interested point of view, because I won the seat off the Liberal Democrats and I don't particularly want them to win it back. So I want to make sure that I'm delivering on those pledges. That aside, there are a number of other things which I'm sort of trying to build a bit of expertise in. One is work and pensions. That has a local resonance because Weston-super-Mare is a seaside town. We have a very large proportion of pensioners in the electorate. But actually, I think it's going to be one of the big issues of the forthcoming couple of decades.
Not a particularly sexy issue, though. It's not something that's going to grab the headlines.
Well, it's not something which has traditionally grabbed the headlines, but I think retirement issues and issues surrounding age are likely to come up the political agenda. It's a very technical area, but it's no more or less technical than, for example, people who are dying to become part of the Treasury team. And that's a well-trodden path of people who want to try and prove they've got something. Work and pensions is probably its rival in terms of you need to be able to grasp the detail. But you're right, it's not traditionally, it's not foreign affairs or something like that. But then, maybe this is a convenient or a sensible thing for me to be focusing on because it's got a local resonance and it's something that I think is going to be interesting and really important for this country in future. that our demographics are changing whether we like it or not, and the way that we deal with not just pensions but also with work and poverty traps and how the benefit system interacts with that, all those things are going to be vital for the success of this country.
It's interesting, isn't it? The demographics of the country have changed so much that we are a youth-obsessed culture, and yet the majority of the electorate are over the age of 55, and I think a lot of politicians actually ignore that fact. But if you're in a seat like yours, where presumably the demographics reflect that quite, or in fact maybe even older,
yeah.
You really need to get to grips with it.
You do, and the interesting thing is that the real push towards us becoming a youth-obsessed culture came when the baby boomers started to hit the headlines, and you had this sort of surge of talent coming through in the post-war years, and going into media and all sorts of other areas as well. Those same baby boomers are now reaching retirement age, and they're still very influential. You've only got to look at leading figures in a huge number of fields. As they stop being able to be, or stop being able to pretend that they are 25 anymore, and actually they're now in their 60s or getting into their 60s, it'll be fascinating to see how, as their preoccupations and worldview changes, whether or not they have the same impact when they're 60, 65 and 70 that they did when they were 20, 25 and 30.
And one of the first things which hit you when you were elected was the leadership campaign, which for a new MP not used to the ways of Parliament and the way that these things work, I guess could have been quite intimidating when you have all of these sort of big beasts touting for your support.
It seems a very long time ago now. It shows how far the party's moved on. Yes, I suppose so. I mean, I think it was definitely something where it helped if you were a Westminster insider. Although, actually, interestingly, I think if you were a Westminster insider, it probably meant that you were more likely to be party pre before you started. Yeah. I had absolutely no, fixed allegiance beforehand at all, other than the fact that Liam Fox, of course, is my next-door neighbour. I think Liam did very, very well in that election. But no, that's why for everything after the first round, ended up just saying, look, I really don't want to talk about this. So I actually didn't tell any of them who I was supporting. I was one of the few MPs in the end who just kept his
Why did you decide to do that?
Because I realised that I really didn't have the knowledge of the individuals that someone who'd been in Westminster for years and years and years had. And what I rapidly realised was that supporters become used as trophies for whoever they've signed up for. Understandably, perfectly reasonable. And that wasn't necessarily something which, if I was terribly comfortable with, if I hadn't known somebody for years and years and years, as many of my colleagues had, and that was perfectly legitimate from their point of view, because they had much more in-depth understanding of the individuals concerned.
So who did you vote for in the end? Or haven't you ever said?
I've never said.
You've never said?
No, no.
Well, we'll leave that one then. But looking back at the result, I mean, David Cameron got a resounding victory, 67% of the vote. How important was that, the fact that he got 67%, as opposed to sort of 51-49, in his ability to carry through what he said he wanted to do?
I think very important at the start. I think that sort of serious majority, and you're right, it was a very convincing win in the end, that bought him some time. I don't think if what he was doing had not had the impact, if he hadn't started to work, I don't think it would have carried him much beyond the first 4 to 6 months. As it was, it bought him enough time so that the things he was doing when they did start to work and the polls started to click up, because that's actually the only thing that really counts, it got him through that initial period, and by the time that initial honeymoon had worn off, there were some very, very solid achievements and solid poll numbers to look at, which meant that anybody who was in any way upset or unhappy was very happy to bite their tongue, and continues to be.
And what would you like to see him do in the next 18 months? We're roughly halfway through this Parliament now. Gordon Brown is about to take over from Tony Blair. It's a whole new political landscape. How do you think he will cope with the great clunking fist of Gordon Brown?